In cadet commands, there is not a mission for pre-med cadets. People like you're like, I want to go to medical school, but there was not a formal mission for cadets to go into medical school. Now, in 2027, there will be a mission. So all of medical school is paid for. It doesn't matter if it's the most expensive or the least expensive. The Army is going to cover that entire tuition.
And while I must say that the pre-med journey has been amazing in Army ROTC, getting that decisive leadership and so many beneficial skills, it was also very confusing because there's not a very well laid out plan for how that works.
They're supposed to graduate. 25 cadets are going to go to medical. I think there recently was an article about how the golden hour is disappearing.
Is the Army considering to change the pinnacle ROTC training event known as Cadet Summer Training from the summer before their senior year to the summer before the junior year, similar to some nursing cadets?
And there's a need for Army physicians.
Are there specific medical schools you would recommend AMEDD pursuing cadets would apply to that are either known for being military friendly or a track record of supporting military pursuing people?
That is an excellent question.
That's huge. Welcome to Learning with Landen. This morning, I am joined by a very special guest, Lieutenant Colonel and medical doctor, Mary Alice Noel. And did I say your name right?
Noel. It's okay though.
Noel.
Christmas.
Perfect. We just got a Christmas season, but yes, Dr. Noel is right now in USAC, so the U.S. Army Cadet Command, and working specifically with AMEDD. So this is going to be a very special interview and discussion about what her role is looking like, me as a pre-med cadet, what that future is looking like, and a lot of possible policy changes and other exciting things in the new year and moving forward. So starting off, Dr. Noel, would you love introducing yourself and what your role currently is in the AMEDD sphere?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Mary Alice Noel. I'm a family medicine physician in the Army. I've been in the Army for about 12 years now as a physician, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to speak to your audience and get involved in the opportunities for pre-med ROTC cadets to successfully get to their goal of being in medical school and being an Army physician. I am the Medical Corps Recruiting Integration Officer. That position is housed under the recruiting command for the Army. And we have a medical recruiting brigade that focuses on all things medical because there's a lot of specialty training that needs to be done in order to come into the Army as a medical professional. So I spend a lot of time to students who are thinking about taking the Health Professions Scholarship Program, which is the opportunity for a cadet or a student to get all of medical school paid for, and then they serve back time in the Army. And I can go into the details of that a little bit later. But yes, so I speak a lot to the cadets. I work with the recruiters who work directly with cadets or pre-medical students, and I go to a lot of conferences, a lot of engagements. So I've been working specifically with Cadet Command, which is a few miles down the road, about ways that we can really make sure that we're setting up the cadets for success. And so that's what brings us to our conversation today.
That's amazing. And so just to add as a caveat, a lot of people that are listening or watching might be hesitant towards the word recruiting because you often think, what's the Army stand for as an acronym? Recruiter misled you. But yeah, sure. I assure you, tons of experience and getting to have that time with other recruiters who are helping pre-med cadets really get into the sphere and career and profession they want to join. So I'm excited. Yeah. This is cool. So is the recruiting under TRADOC?
It actually is transitioned to its own command. So it is a brief command now as of October. So it is falling directly under the Army. And so it was under TRADOC previously. And I believe the Corps of Cadets has some place in that as well, as that big transition is occurring.
Yeah, those transition periods, always hard to keep up with. So just for a background for those of you who might be new to me and my journey, I applied for the National Army ROTC Scholarship between my junior and senior year summer. I got a conditional acceptance moving into my senior year, did end up accepting that, and now I attend Carroll College, where I'm currently a college senior, which falls under the University of Montana's Grizzly Battalion in 8th Brigade. And while I must say that the pre-med journey has been amazing in Army ROTC, getting that decisive leadership and so many beneficial skills, it was also very confusing because there's not a very well laid out plan for how that works. A lot of people going into ROTC are following one of the 16 general branches, note to say like infantry or field artillery, stuff like that, signal corps. But AMEDD is kind of its own thing. similar to the nursing cadets. And so with that process, I ended up having an idea. So coming into freshman year, when I was signing my contract that fall, they ended up telling me you can try to get a 4-year scholarship or a 5-year scholarship. A lot of pre-medical cadets end up needing an extra year. I said, let's go with 5. But as a dumb freshman, I did not get it in writing. And then come around my junior year, they're like, wait, but you're on a 4-year scholarship, but your current 104R or your academic schedule says that you have an extra semester. This isn't good. So long story short, I fortunately was able to work with my command, and strangely enough, I still haven't gotten approval till this spring, where they're finally able to sign and send it to 8th Brigade asking that they approve an extra semester so I can fulfill all my core requirements and have that extra year, because under the HPSP, we'll probably get into this, you can't take a gap year. So it requires you to move seamlessly from your undergraduate studies to your medical school time. And so I worked out kind of a unique way of saying, okay, I'll go 4.5 years, needed an extra course or 2 in that extra semester. And then I have a gap semester, gain medical experience, take time off, try to reset yourself, and then enter medical school that late summer of the following year. So kind of a unique pathway for me, but it's one that fortunately worked out with, say, cadet summer training my junior summer. I didn't have to worry about applying to medical schools that same summer. I'm taking the MCAT now in about 14 days and then applying to med school this spring/summer. For any of you listening, that is kind of the convoluted path of my AMEDD journey, as well as the National Guard versus active debate. Up until about 1 year ago, I was actually considering the National Guard. I had an interview with a current National Guard surgeon, and he ended up saying on the active side, you're probably not going to be doing much surgery. So he likes doing those weekend drills and then working in the civilian sector at a hospital performing surgeries there. So depending on where you might be in a pre-med journey and what your interests lie, if you really like surgery, maybe Guard works for you. I determined for myself the active career path is best. But hopefully that's a good overview of what my current journey is like, and I'm excited to learn about some new things for AMEDD. With that said, I'm curious about recent changes with AMEDD and why we're even having this interview. Was it something that was specifically under recruiting's command saying we need to get more doctors into the Army? Is it something from the cadet side? Where is this coming at?
Yeah, it actually is coming from the Army G1, which is the manpower cell that looks at what we anticipate for future conflicts in the United States. What is the future battlefield going to look like? So we're coming out of a 20-year war on terror where there was no front line. There was a lot of different tactics and techniques and procedures that were used that are not going to apply for what we think the future fight is going to look like, which would be more like a near peer fight, or a fight where we are fighting someone who has equivalent resources. And so I think there recently was an article about how the golden hour is disappearing. And so in Army medicine, our idea of trauma care now coming out of that experience in Iraq and Afghanistan is that we can take people who are very, very seriously wounded and get them to a surgeon within an hour and save their lives. And we just don't think we're going to have the air superiority that was present in the war on terror. And so that means that you're not going to be able to evacuate someone to a surgeon immediately because you don't have the ability to safely transport people in airspace. So that changes a lot about how many physicians we need and what the landscape is going to look like, 10 years from now, even 5 to 10 to 15 years from now. And so I can't predict the future, but we have to do this model to determine what our need is in the future. And so the Army G1 decided that we didn't have enough physicians. And if you're just working healthcare in the Army, you're going to be like, yeah, we don't have physicians, because you feel the pull and the strain of having people deployed, and then there's still patient care to happen in the hospital you're working at. But from the Army G1, they did an analysis of people who stay in, who are retained. Obviously, if you have an ADSO, if you have a service obligation, you're going to stay in. I'm one of those people. So my path took me from the military academy. I went to West Point for my undergrad, and then I went to the Uniformed Services University. So I have a very long age. So I will say, as a family physician, I'm loving it. I've really had an excellent
That's
career.
amazing.
But I still owe 8 years. So the Army saw that, we don't have in cadet command, there is not a mission for pre-med cadets. People like you're like, I want to go to medical school. You found out that you could do it through ROTC. And so you made the path for yourself, but there was not a formal mission for cadets to go into medical school. Now in 2027, there will be a mission. And we all know that it's a long journey. Well, at least I know, and and people who are pre-med hopefully know that it's a long journey. It's not just a decision you make within a year and then you go to medical school. You have to be preparing for this for years. And so the Cadet Command now has mission to bring in, I believe the number is 25 in fiscal year 2027. They're supposed to bring in 25 or graduate 25 cadets who are going to go to medical school. And that mission is similar. So at West Point, there is a congressional order that 2% of that class was going to go to medical school, which is one of the reasons why I chose West Point.
2%.
There was a path, and that was kind of like it was a small number, but it was a number. Like, hey, we will send 2% of our class to medical school. So when the Army G1 looked at all this, they decided they needed more. They needed to formalize the mission for ROTC, and then they also increased the number at West Point from 2% to 3%. So that's a really big deal.
Wow. Okay.
Places are supposed to create, the concept of a war fighter, of the airborne ranger. Right? All of us graduated wanting to be an airborne ranger. That's just what's brought, put into you the whole 4 years.
Right, hooah culture.
Right. Yes. But there's also a need for physicians, and there's a need for Army physicians, or people who are Army officers and understand that culture before they even step into medical school. And that's what the military academy as well as the ROTC programs provide, and pathways for people who are prior service, like they were medics or they were officers and then went to medical school. So I think there's a lot of interest in bringing in people who love the Army, like know they want to serve and they want to be a physician. And then you look at the biographies of a lot of the general officers and people in leadership right now in AMEDD, in the Army Medical Department, and you see that a lot of them have done an ROTC path or West Point or went to the military medical school. So yeah, that's really why we're having this conversation, is because now Cadet Command is very interested now that they have a mission. And how are we supporting our cadets? And so I had the opportunity through some different connections here on Fort Knox. I'm in Fort Knox, Kentucky, to sit down with some of the leadership at Cadet Command. And I also went to advanced camp this summer, which was really exciting for me to get to meet a lot of med cadets going through.
You probably passed right by me.
Probably. So we're there at Branch Day at the Medical Service Corps tent, right? Because we're not something you can directly go into. So we don't have our own space, but we would just hang out there and pull people aside and say, okay, if you're interested in medical school, let's chat. And so I started getting exposed to the National Guard conversation, to, I'm taking my MCAT after advanced camp. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so late. Yeah. So really the drive for knowing there needs to be change started for me as I entered my job in July. I came from Fort Benning, Georgia. I was on teaching faculty and I was department chief. And so I've been mostly in the hospital setting for the last 6 years, minus my tour in Iraq. And so that really made me open my eyes to the need for education and for training and for help. Even our medical recruiters don't quite understand the ROTC process. And so that's where I'm trying to fill a gap. And again, we're looking for input on how this is helpful for y'all to make this path as streamlined as possible.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting to think in the past 4 years at Carroll, we've had 3 AMEDD recruiters turn over. Yeah. And so, there's no continuity. There's a lot of confusion. So this is amazing. And to hear a formalized mission, like that's huge. A lot of people might think, oh, that's just words. But no, that is that commander's intent. That's how things get done.
Yes.
So it's great to hear.
Yeah.
And I know we too often use acronyms that people don't always understand the meaning to. So could you explain AMEDD a little bit, how it's not only for physicians, but it's kind of Army healthcare at large?
Right. So the Army Medical Department is what AMEDD stands for. And so that covers everything that touches a person from a medical context. I mean, even from like medevac pilots to, they fall under the Medical Service Corps branch. We have dietitians and audiologists and occupational therapists and physical therapists, nursing. There are physician scientists and people who do research. And so there's so many AOCs, which, area of concentration where you can participate in Army medicine using your unique skills that you were trained to do. Again, most of these things require some type of prior training or experience or degrees in order to get in there. So that's why our recruiting brigade exists, because you have to really understand all the things that are needed to create a doctor or a nurse or a physical therapist. And so that's where our recruiters have a really unique mission, because you're not speaking to 17 and 18-year-olds and getting them into the Army the next month. You're talking to people potentially years ahead of them joining the Army.
Yeah. That's great. So it gives a little better idea of what AMEDD at large is. And now for a question that generated quite a bit of mixed response in between my fellow pre-med cadets. And that's this. Is the Army considering to change the pinnacle ROTC training event known as Cadet Summer Training from the summer before their senior year to the summer before the junior year, similar to some nursing cadets?
I will caveat that I am not part of Cadet yet, but that is a conversation that is starting, and we really need your feedback on what would be helpful. One of the things that, and so let me just briefly, for those who don't maybe fully understand the kind of the to medical school, really freshman and sophomore year, you should be thinking about, I want to go to medical school and I need to prepare myself to get into medical school. And so you need to take your pre-med requisites, and you need to think about when you're going to take the MCAT, which is the exam you have to take to get into medical school, and what is my timeline? Because the application for applying to medical school opens the end of May of your junior year. If you're thinking about this in a 4-year context of where you're going to graduate as a senior and go straight to medical school, which is what most of the ROTC cadets is their experience, you have to be applying to medical school. So when you have to be ready and have everything ready in May of your junior year to apply to medical school. And so that includes having taken your MCAT and doing well on your MCAT. You have to have all your science classes and prerequisites in, or, you're anticipating to complete them by the end of your senior year. All the things that make you competitive as a medical school applicant. So shadowing experiences, leadership opportunities, volunteering, all those things have to already be in a nice rolled up package to go. And so then you submit all that, and then between that, and then you submit that in May. Schools start sending out their secondary applications almost immediately in June. And the medical school application process is rolling admissions. And so it is a first come, first serve type of situation. So even though you might have maxed out the MCAT, you have an amazing GPA, you will walk on water. If you are too late in the application process, and I'm talking about submitting your main application in August, September, October, November of your senior year, you might miss out on a slot. And that is something people don't understand about how the admissions process works for medical school. So it is imperative that you submit on time. To me, it's, in the Army, it's like early is on time, right? Like you submit the day it opens. And then you are ready to submit those secondary applications, because as soon as you get those secondary applications in, then comes the interviews. And so if you want to be one of those people who's first in line to shoot for the interview process, then you need to be getting in those secondaries. Advanced camp is occurring at all kinds of times, right? I don't fully understand how they slot cadets in, but my understanding is that it can be anywhere from, you're starting in June to, I was talking to people in the hot Fort Knox sun in August. And so, in advanced camp with really there's no time and space to think through, because they want you to resubmit another personal statement, or, they want you to get more letters or whatever is involved in submitting your secondary application. You have no time and space to intentionally sit down and make that as competitive as you can. And so if you're stuck in advanced camp, not going to be doing those secondaries until you get back. And depending on when you go in the summer, you might be behind the main, slew of people who submitted in May, and you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So the conversation is, should cadets go to advanced camp training between their sophomore and their junior year, so that they have checked that box for ROTC, and now they can fully concentrate on preparing themselves for medical school? One of the things I really want to highlight is that while, ROTC cadets, you had mentioned earlier about the 4-year gap, it's not the HPSP scholarship that creates the need to go directly from school to medical school. It's the ROTC scholarship.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So the ROTC scholarship is what is driving that. You have to go from your senior year into medical school, whereas 73% of the matriculating of the people going into medical school class from last year, per the AAMC data, and the AAMC runs the MCAT and, all the medical schools. It covers all medical schools. 73% of people have taken a gap year or more than just 1 year. And so that's
Right. Like
a
24.5 is the average matriculant age now, right?
right.
Yeah.
Like, but the way the ROTC scholarship is designed, and similar to West, you do your 4 years and then you go in. So you are at almost like a year disadvantage anyway to the most of the people going in for building experiences, studying for the MCAT, et cetera. So with all that, if you can take care of advanced camp, check that box, then you can spend your entire junior year prepping for the MCAT. If for some reason you need to retake your MCAT, then it's not, oh no, I'm going to advanced camp in June. So now I'm going to wait till after advanced camp to retake my MCAT. That is not ideal at all. Maybe putting more of the emphasis on getting that training in. People also don't think about the fact that ROTC Advanced Camp is a huge leadership experience, and there are leadership opportunities that can be written into multiple areas of the AMCAS application. And so it doesn't matter if you're a supply sergeant or, any kind of little leadership position that you consider wasn't that big of a deal. It's a huge deal, and you can put that in multiple areas. And that's what I think, part of this pathway is going to include a guide to how to beef up your application for AMCAS using your ROTC experiences. They've had a lot of great success with this at West Point. They have an excellent pre-med advisor there who's a Army surgeon or was an Army surgeon, and he has helped them transform their cadet experiences into something that a civilian reading an application can say, oh man, this person has done all kinds of leadership experiences, and this is what we're looking for. So while you aren't doing community service, you're doing a leadership experience. So people might think like, well, I'm going to miss out on XYZ. No, like use advanced camp to your advantage in your application to say, these are all the things that I've done. I've been in very challenging physical and mental situations. I understand teamwork. I can, deal with the rigors of an 80-hour work week. That's going to be my future as an intern. So I think that that advanced camp would be a great thing to be able to speak to in your applications. So nothing is on paper. Bottom line is that nothing is on paper yet when you're doing advanced, but we want feedback about what that looks like. Looking back on it, my experiences in my junior year leading up to my senior year, I was doing experiences that were going to enhance my application, because we at West Point, you do your kind of whatever the CST experiences. We did that between our sophomore and our junior years. And so that was time that was missed out. I was doing leadership things. I was doing some shadowing opportunities. And things like that between my junior and senior year.
Yeah, because to put it into perspective, Cadet Summer Training or Advanced Camp is 35 days currently. And so for me, with my AMEDD internship after, that was 66 total days from June 15th to August 18th. I was gone. And you're right, if I was on a 4-year plan still and I was taking my MCAT either right before and being one of the people who was anxious every day to get their score results back, because the AAMC waits for a month to release your scores. Yeah. And then they just can't concentrate on their leadership studies because now they're worried about that. And then one of the pre-med cadets with me at Fort Jackson, she was working on our secondaries frantically every hour, just while we weren't doing military training and medical training and that. So it's just so much more to try to manage and to excel at when it's an extremely competitive pursuit. So yeah, I'm really curious. Comment below if you think that it should be moved to the summer between your sophomore and junior year, kind of mimic the West Point model, or if you think that having that time and the leadership experience when ROTC is also difficult, it takes a lot of time to build those skills. If you think CST should maintain between your junior and senior summer, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, food for thought. Looking back, I probably would have preferred it between junior and senior year, just because I know my program, for instance, really rigorous. I would not have been nearly prepared enough. That learning curve, my junior fall semester with squad tactics was really beneficial. And then also having class conflicts, those difficult. People have class conflicts when ROTC lab might need some extra time, versus people have maybe a smaller program or one-on-one time with 3s and 4s, really can build those skills early on and be more prepared. But yeah, I know people who've done it between their sophomore and junior year for nursing. They did well. Others did their junior and senior, did not do well. So there's a lot of variability in there.
Every program is different. And so maybe an option to go between your sophomore and junior year or your junior and senior year. But the Army's not very good at options. So that's why I have a feeling this might be a policy. But again, any input that people have from on the ground, and I'm creating my list of people that I speak to about the HPSP scholarship. I'm tagging them in my list of this is ROTC. I need their information. I have somebody at UT who I'm going to contact who's going to medical school, got accepted to medical school. And so I'd love to hear feedback from those people. And I can share my contact information at the end of the recording if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be phenomenal. I'll probably leave that contact info in the description of this video so you can get there. But yeah, and talking about contacts, I think that's perhaps one of my favorite questions I'm excited to ask is, are there specific medical schools you would recommend AMEDD pursuing cadets would apply to that are either known for being military friendly or a track record of supporting military pursuing people?
That is an excellent question. I'm only about 6 months into this job, so I don't have a large list of schools, but my goal is to create find those schools and to start developing some relationships. So one that I want to highlight is NeoMed that I'm visiting in a few weeks. That's in Northeast Ohio. And so they have a great relationship established with West Point. And we're going to talk about, can there be some slots reserved for ROTC specific cadets? Because when an admission committee looks at the file, your file's just not going to be as robust as someone who took a three-year gap year, did an additional degree in a research lab, right? I've talked to some pre-med students who have these incredible experiences and you just can't, they were in the Peace Corps or whatever, you can't compete with that, at face value. But if you have an admissions committee that understands ROTC, the HPSP scholarship, I think that's really important to look for a school that has something like that. So NeoMed has something like that. I know that Zana has a lot of appreciation. They have the Corps of Cadets there. And so they certainly have a lot of military focus.
Okay.
And understanding, and people on their admissions committee or in their school who were prior military. So they understand what you're up against in trying to prepare to go to medical school in just 4 years. And then really it's just 3 years, right? We talked about that application being due at the end of your junior year. And so so we're looking at developing that list, developing some of those relationships. And I know personally HPSP students who I have trained over the years as residents who had great HPSP programs at their schools. And so, pretty robust community. And so you have that support as well. Whereas some students go to places that may be N of one in their class that's HPSP. And it might be, the only other person they know who's HPSP might be Air Force or Navy. And so I think that's important to look at. Go to whatever school you get into, right? Like sometimes you don't have the luxury of choosing, but I think, it's important to think about what is this going to look like with the health professions scholarship experience.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think at my school of just about 1,200 students, the last person to get an HPSP scholarship, I think was 3 or 4 years older than me. So luckily I got in contact with him. But yeah, it's been several years of really no one that's managed that directly, except the pre-med advisor. But then even he's kind of out of the loop because you're at the communication bridge is tough. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to help fix. Yeah. When we see, ROTC cadets, they're driven, they're disciplined, they're going to be prepared mentally and physically for those tough roles. And then if you're willing to do both and be locked in with our service requirement after, you're probably not going to drop out your MS1 year of med school. Right. We're a little more bought in, which I think is huge. Yeah. So it's great to hear. Yeah.
I'd love to take an opportunity to talk about what the HPSP scholarship is, because I don't know if everybody's familiar with what that is. And so, especially,
that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, if you're ROT, this just makes sense to do HPSP. So the Health Professions Scholarship Program is a 4-year scholarship. So all of medical school is paid for. You go to an accredited medical school in the U.S. or Puerto Rico. It doesn't matter if it's the most expensive or the least expensive. The Army is going to cover that entire tuition. They will also cover almost all the fees, save like a fee. If there's like a social organization you have to pay a fee for, that might not be covered, but all your books, if you want to rent a laptop, that gets covered. So you get all of that. You also get a stipend while you're there. So you're continuing to make money. You actually get an income of about $40,000 pre-tax each year at medical school. And so that's your stipend that you get for 10 and a half months. And then you get 45 days where you're on active duty as a second lieutenant. Some of that time is used for the basic officer leadership course. And then you have other opportunities to go to military hospitals and do your shadowing or your clerkship experiences, or your student interview experiences. And so that 45 days is every year. You get second lieutenant pay during that time. And that's a decent amount compared to what you would be making just with it's about a $3,000 stipend that you get monthly. And then there's also a $20,000 session bonus that we are going after Congress this year, next year, to try to increase, because really we've had a $20,000 bonus for 2 decades. It's been a really long time. So that has not increased inflation. And so I think that also will be helpful if we can increase that scholarship that gets paid within a few months of going to medical school. So in return, so the Army pays and then you owe time. That's how all of it always works. Army gives you an exchange. that is paid for. I have an MBA that the Army paid for. You owe 10. And so so you would owe 4 years after residency or the length of your residency. Now, when you add on the ROTC commitment, some of that might change a little bit because you're already going to be in for your commitment. So you'll have your ROTC commitment, and then after that, you are going to pay back 4 years. There is a 4-year inactive reserve commitment as well. So when you look at it, it says 8 years for your commitment. When you sign the contract for HPSP,
Correct.
4 of those are active duty, and then 4 are in the inactive reserve, which just means that your name is on a roster somewhere here on Fort Knox. And if World War III happens, you might get called back on to active duty. But you're not drilling with that. You're not doing any type of training. That's just your name on a roster. So for, an ROTC cadet who does a 4-year residency, or I believe even if you do a 6-year residency, right, you're paying back some of that time for ROTC in that 6 years. So it could look like an 8-year commitment, I would say at a minimum, after you complete residency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of time. And it gets you to that point where you're kind of mid-career. There is a blended retirement system now compared to the old retirement, legacy retirement system. So you are able to contribute to your thrift savings plan and get matching up to 4%. And so you can still build your 401k while you're in, even if you decide to leave. And so that has changed the thought a little bit about going all the way to 20 years. But the pension is still very real. The healthcare benefits that you get, the insurance coverage, all that is very real. I personally, I have 6 children. I'm a mom of 6, and we very much appreciate the health insurance we get through TRICARE Prime and the benefits of that. So a lot of people at your age aren't thinking about that, but when you hit
it's
that,
good too.
I'm coming up to my 8-year, commitment. My time's about to be up. That might be something you're really thinking of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Because knowing for me, kind of 8 to 12 years and then say 4 years reserve after, it's like 12 to 16 years with my active 4-year ROTC undergrad scholarship. So then, of course, they're like, oh, why not go the 20? Which, unless it's just absolutely dragging, probably will. And it's good to know that the promotion, so say if you're in surgery, you might end up continue performing medicine a little longer. I've heard some say you're going to be pushed into those major to lieutenant colonel admin roles. And then some people are like, I'm not practicing anymore. I can't do this. I need to get out. But it's good to know personality types. Sometimes seasons of change are good for everyone.
Yeah. I will say that, and people look at the infantry world, they look at what the standard is on the Army side. It's a little different in the medical corps. So what I would give advice to for anybody who is ROTC, and I had an opportunity to mentor an internal medicine physician who was ROTC in my last job. And so, what I told her was that, hey, do your PME, which is your professional military education, and you have a very high rate of success in promoting. And so if you do your captain's career course at some point, like before your lieutenant colonel board, you do your ILE or intermediate learning level education or command and general staff's college. If you do those things, you're pretty well set up, and you have your OERs are written decently. Your OERs have a heartbeat, right? Like, so you're above math, like, every few OERs, and you have a really good chance of getting promoted on kind of an every 6-year basis. And so now I've actually promoted earlier than my West Point classmates at this point, becoming an OER. And so it's being a second lieutenant for 4 years. You're looking at all your classmates. My classmates, guys who graduated in 2008 from West Point, they were already captains by the time I finished medical school. And so I was like, man, but then you skip first lieutenant, you go straight to captain, and then it's kind of an every 6-year trajectory is what is common right now.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. Because you're right, not joining as a butter bar, but you go through med school and you instantly get that captain's rank and pay. So something that not everyone might be familiar with, but it's good to also keep in mind. You're not drastically behind your peers who are going to be in that platoon leader role for 2 years and then maybe promote up. And then I guess generally, is there any specific advice you'd give to ROTC cadets or even non-ROTC students who are pre-med who may be considering the military? I know some of my friends we're starting to realize, oh, we could have this mountain of debt, or I could think of military, and what advice you'd give to them.
So where you are right now, it's important to backwards plan. Like I told you before, look at your timelines for when the gates are for applications opening and really preparing for those times. And it is important to prioritize getting into medical school, because if you don't get into medical school, you're going to go be an infantry officer, an engineer officer, or whatever, And so it's important to really make sure you are prioritizing what you need to do to get into medical school. And so that's a very competitive, a competitive MCAT. Your GPA needs to be solid. I mean, and I would say about a 3.7 or higher is kind of the average, I believe. That you
Yeah,
do
something like that.
shadowing experiences or experiences with the medical system. And if it's in the Army medical system, then that's a bonus, but it doesn't have to be. We are also looking at opportunities to make sure that ROTC cadets get opportunities to do internships. We're talking about
For summer.
really like trying to find some opportunities for internships at military hospitals for ROTC cadets. And so we've already got a pathway that's going to start, hopefully open up this summer. If you're interested, let me know, because I'm looking for some to go to Walter Reed on an internship program that kind of piggybacks off of what West Point cadets already have. And so there's already things, the program's established, that if we just add on to, a few ROTC cadets to those programs, I think one, it'll enhance the program, certainly. As a West Point cadet,
Absolutely.
when I had ROTC students embedded, or I went to airborne school with them, and I loved learning about their experiences and making those connections, because Army is a very small world. The Army medical world is very small. And so you'll run into people down the
Don't
line.
burn bridges.
But like, make bridges, right? Like, make those connections when you're at these training events, because you never know who you're going to run into in Iraq, like years down the road. It probably won't be Iraq, but so
let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not Iraq. So so I would just encourage you, think about what you need to do to get into medical school, because that's what you need to do. You need to prepare for making yourself competitive for medical school. Really, you have to prioritize. That is a hard decision sometimes, when a lot of people coming into ROTC are very well accomplished and did everything in high school. You're going to have to start editing your schedule. And I had to learn this kind of the hard way, even into medical school, right? Like, I struggled in my first year of medical school because I was just used to doing all the things and still performing.
So true.
At some point you hit the point where you have to focus and edit your schedule to make sure you're saying no to certain things that aren't going to drive you directly to your goal. And so that is really important. And certainly the military training that you're getting in ROTC is extremely important. Every experience you have with the military before becoming a military physician is going to impact how you are as a military physician. It is so important to not waste those opportunities, or not dismiss those opportunities, because even as, like I said, if you get tagged as a supply surgeon, or you're making a roster, or you're doing some kind of physical training that you are not really excited about, all those things are going to make you a better Army doctor, because you've experienced some of the Army, of the people that you're taking care of. And I think that's why, if you get an opportunity to go to airborne school or air assault, you're going to be with soldiers. And it's important to be with soldiers and experience what they're going through, so that when you're taking care of them as a physician, you understand what it's like to go on a 12-mile ruck march, or you understand the fact that their main liquid intake is energy drinks, right? And like, that impacts your ability to sleep. And so, it's important to understand the culture that you're going to be caring for, the people you're caring for.
Yeah, so true. Something about that with people who might be pursuing the HPSP, or maybe not, because of this kind of misconception, is that during medical school, you're pretty much just a med student. The two Army trainings, if you could talk a little more on that, how they're mainly just during the summer, either during or after med school.
Right. And so the direct commission course and the basic officer leadership course are typically between the first and second year of medical school. So it's a total of 6 weeks. My understanding, and I am fairly confident, that you do not have to go to the direct commission course if you have done ROTC, because it's basically just how to wear your uniform, how to march, like very basics. And so that's people who have zero military experience coming in. My understanding is that you do not have to attend that DCC course at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. You do attend.
And I've heard some people that have had to attend the DCC. So maybe it's mixed.
So there's the direct commission course, which is 3 weeks in Fort Sill. And then there is the basic officer leadership course that's at Fort Sam Houston down in Texas. And that's going to be more Army specific officer training. So Army medical officer training. You will learn about the concepts of tactical combat casualty care. You'll look at kind of the structure of the Army medical department, and maybe progression in your career, just some introductory aspects of being an Army medical officer. That all happens between your first and second year. And then that's all the military training you're getting during your 4 years of medical school. So our goal, if you're taking the HPSP scholarship, is that you are just focusing on doing medical school. and being as good of a doctor as you can be, graduating and being competitive for residency.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, for any of you thinking that's like ROTC, but in med school, it's not. You are a med student first. The Army understands that difficulty. So don't let that be a deterrent if that's something that's keeping you away from pursuing that path.
Yeah. And I went to the Unified Services University, which I just share that as well. So HPSP is any medical school, right? You get into the medical school, but you can even start applying for the HPSP scholarship before you get into medical school. So I advise people to start working with their medical recruiter in August or September of their senior year before they're going to go to medical school. Kind of as they're doing their secondary applications, they fill out the paperwork for HPSP. You do not have to have a letter of acceptance to get conditionally accepted to HPSP. So that's also important to know. You don't have to. But the Uniformed Services University is another opportunity. It is a medical school. So when you do your AMCAS application, you would apply for USU. And I think it's important to, if you're thinking about doing USU, you should do HPSP, kind of vice versa. It's very competitive to get into USU. There's only 62 Army slots. And so, you would be an Army slot person, and they do have a early decision program. So if you can actually apply to one medical school, AAMC has a program where you just apply to one medical school. You put all your eggs in one basket, but then you find out by October if you got in or not. And so if you're someone who's very competitive, then you save a lot of money not applying to all the other medical schools. But that's something to think about. Is USU just started offering that this last summer as an early decision program. But USU is a 4-year medical school. It's Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Public Health Service. Your commitment time is more because you're getting paid as a second lieutenant the entire time you're there in DC. So you're getting DC VA housing. You're getting second lieutenant pay. So you're getting about $80,000 a year. But then you owe 7 years after residency compared to the 4 for HPSP. So that's a whole assignment's worth. Like usually, we move around every 3 years. It's starting to get a little bit longer in between tours for Army physicians, but that is still time. When I was my 5 commitment, I was like, whatever, I could do another 7 years, and here I am, still with time left, right? Like with trying to do life, outside of Army medicine. So just know that is an additional commitment, but there are some advantages to being in the medical system because you're going to be doing your clerkship rotations at military hospitals. So you're kind of a nomad for, a couple of years. You can be in DC for some of that, but you might be rotating around a lot. So they have a lot of great information on their website. And so highly recommend reaching out to their admissions department. I have great connections there to speak to their dean of admissions, or they have a assistant dean for recruiting. And so always happy to speak with students if they have questions about that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be great. But in hindsight, if you're a pre-med student, do you think you'd consider pursuing USUHS again, or maybe a civilian med school?
That's a great question. And my recruiters all ask this too, right? Because I'm working with recruiters for the HPSUs. In some ways, it's viewed as competition. I think it's really important to build the context of what the world looked like when I graduated. So I graduated in 2008 from West Point. Almost all of my classmates were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan within a year of graduating. I had already had 2 friends killed in combat, like 2 people I knew very well, killed in combat by the time I graduated. And so that's really sober. That was a really sobering time. And I had no desire to take off the uniform. I really wanted to be in Army medicine, and USU provided a pathway to do that, to keep my uniform on every single day. I got to work at the National Naval Medical Center, it was the big Walter Reed conversion between Bethesda and Walter Reed. They all came together and made a big campus that exists now. But before I worked at Bethesda and took care of wounded Marines. I mean, I got to see people. I was in surgeries where people had literally come off the plane, and I was in their first surgery as a 3rd-year medical student. And so that was a tremendous honor to be involved in, as I was in medical school. So those experiences, I think, if you ask me now, and knowing what I know now about being a mom and having life happen, when there might be an option to get out. I'm not sure. I tell people that I'm nobody telling me like, hey, that's a really long time you're committing to the Army. Nobody said that to me. So I say that to people because it truly is, I've got an 11 and under are my kids right now. And so, if you want an opportunity to have options of whether you stay or go, it should all be considered as you're looking at your different opportunities. So I'm not sure. I got accepted to University of Alabama, Birmingham, which would have been an excellent experience as well, close to home for me. So I don't know. I think it's really important for people just to consider what they want out of their life. What do they value? Backwards plan from like the end of your life, right? Think about like, what do you want long term and help that inform your decisions, because there are so many bright and shiny things that are out there. And the Army is really good at like, here's a shiny thing, go after this. And then all of a sudden you're stuck somewhere where like, I don't think I meant to be here. Thankfully, I've had a lot of mentors in my life who've helped direct my path, where I believe that my lifetime values and lifetime goals have aligned with my career path so far. But that's taken mentorship and reflection and a huge team of people around me to help me make those decisions. So find those people.
I like it. There's a theme establishing. Yeah, don't get caught up in the cultural busyness. Backwards plan.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a cool story. Because I know for USUHS throughout my time, it's kind of been more of a plan B. I haven't thought of it forefront.
Yeah.
But it would be, incredible to see just that continuation of wearing the uniform, just being straight in. Because I know my personality, that's why I pursued active, is I don't want one foot in, one foot out.
Yeah.
And then knowing there's different ways of, you can be a doctor on a line unit, do something hoo-ah, or you can be back in a different role hospital or whatever. But wow. Yeah, incredible. So something still food for thought. Maybe I'll apply to USUHS.
Yeah. I encourage people to, because just open it up, open up your aperture to see everything that's available and just see what happens.
Wow. Pretty much answers all my big questions. So mention briefly about the educational delay. So tagged on to the HPSP, if you are anyone pursuing Army medicine and getting med school paid for, you'll go the HPSP route, which is the active scholarship. But the educational delay is unique to people who are in ROTC in their undergraduate studies. And so with that, I'm curious if you agree with this timeline. My current recruiter said that I should contact him after I take the MCAT January 16th, and then we'll start getting the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, I would say that for educational delay, that does not involve your recruiter might have some guidance for you, but that goes through ROTC. That's all through Cadet Command. So applying for EdLC with your professor of military science, and your RU, the recruiting operations officer, is going to be getting training on these things as well, given the mission that's coming up, because they're going to start talking to freshmen and sophomores about going to medical school. And so it's important to make sure your professor of military science knows that's your intention to apply for ed delay as soon as possible. Talk to them as a freshman. Say, I want to go to medical school. I know that there's certain things I need to get done. Can you help me? Right? Like, they are the person who are going to submit your application. I think they have a portion of the application they have to write for you. And that ed delay board, it is important to get that in before, if you were going to advanced camp, like it should be in before advanced camp. Like, you should have all your stuff done, because the board meets in, I want to say it's late August or early September, and then they make a decision about who gets accepted. And so that's the ROTC as a whole. Cadet Command looks at, these are people who are asking to go to medical school. So it's a board that occurs in the early summer, or late summer, I guess, early fall. And you should have all your stuff ready to go for that ed delay board, because that's going to have its own application process to it. And so the recruiter might be able to help you with that, but your PMS is going to need to know about. And if they don't, right, again, reach out to me. There are people who understand it, and it's not been so socialized and taught that every PMS knows the ins and outs of the ed delay board, or they even know that you can go to medical school. I would hope that most of them know you can go to medical school through ROTC, but some of them may not fully understand that process.
Yeah, that's really good to know, because being a satellite school to U of M, my PMS, we don't often get a lot of FaceTime. I don't believe he was tracking that he would submit something on my behalf. So I'll definitely clarify with him then. Because the recruiter made it sound like they're the one who fills out all the paperwork and gets it submitted for me.
It goes through Cadet Command. So it's not through the
through
recruiter.
Cadet Command.
In command, and it's going to go through. So the recruiter will help, but it's important to know that, because some people will do the ed delay before they even know a medical recruiter. Usually the medical recruiter in the back, after you've been accepted by ed delay, you're going to medical school, and now you're applying for HPSP. And I hope we're talking about the same medical recruiter, right? Like an AMEDD recruiter.
Medical recruiter. That's good to know. So some people do the educational delay before the HPSP.
Yeah, right. Because that's very early on in the process. You find out if the results of that board before branch training. And so, you have that whole year to do the HPSP scholarship before you start medical school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Try to get everything else done that are priorities, and then HPSP can be on the back end your senior year.
Yeah, the way I kind of explain it to Cadet Command, and as I'm starting to work with doing some educational opportunities about the whole way to medical school. And then the program itself is called the Medical Core Scholar Program, MCSP. And so that is the formalized title of the program that we're starting. And so again, it's going to be in writing, like end of January, I believe. But we're really starting to work on educational opportunities for the different brigades and making sure people understand the program. But, really, you take your MCAT, you apply for your Ed Delay Board, you apply for the HPSP scholarship while you're applying to medical school. I have a graphic that would be helpful too to share with you.
Yeah, the visual aids are helpful.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person. Yeah.
Yeah, excited. So yeah, I'll start reaching out to both my PMS and AMEDD recruiter and start working out any confusion that might be there. That's good to know. Is there anything else you'd like to say for the good of the group, the audience, and or what the future looks like?
I would just like to say I'm honored to get to speak to people that I haven't met yet through this channel. And I think that that's amazing that you can get information this way. And so take advantage of everything you can listen to, everything you can read about military medicine. If you're a podcaster, highly recommend the WarDocs podcast. If you haven't heard that, it is a variety of interviews with people who have been in Army, Navy, Air Force medicine. And so it's really an amazing podcast. And I think we're going to be doing an HPSP podcast coming up in the spring. But there's also a HPSP student interviewed last May. That was an excellent interview to listen to as well. So we're at WarDocs. Yeah, WarDocs podcast. And so that's on Apple. And they have just some really incredible people that they have interviewed in that. You can listen. If you're a podcaster, you would really enjoy it.
I hope you have enjoyed this very insightful discussion with Dr. Noel. I'm excited to see what the future holds for this new program, the MCSP.
Core Scholar Program.
Sweet. And everything else. So as always, ad meliora.
Toward better things.
If you found this video helpful, I'm sure you're also going to like this interview with a recent second lieutenant who is pursuing military intelligence. He gives great advice about the ROTC and life beyond as an Army officer. So go listen to that. Thank you. I'll see you there.